Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Gotham as well as the latest episode of Arrow. Like always, if there's something that you don't want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Gotham, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Arrow. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Gotham. Another great episode of Gotham. A lot of stuff went down in this episode, so let's kind of break things down bit by bit. First of all, let's talk about the return of Ivy. I was wondering what they were going to do with Ivy's character, because they had that whole situation of because I brought that up earlier in the season. I was like, okay, Ivy, had that whole thing where she took that stuff from the shop and then we saw her kind of transforming and then that was it. And I was like, oh, we're not cutting back to it at all. So this is our first time kind of getting a look at that. Granted, I kind of caught glimpses of the preview, so I kind of already knew that ahead of time. But still, it's kind of interesting because I wasn't expecting her to kind of be what she is right now. I expected her to be more monstrous, but maybe that's something that's going to pop up later on in her character. Not monstrous in the sense of what she's... It's kind of interesting because a lot of more... I feel like maybe that's just my knowledge of more recent adaptations of stuff having her being a lot more plant-like. I mean, I guess my my mental image of what Poison Ivy looks like, typically I always go back to kind of who she was in Batman the Animated Series from the 90s. But even then, that's been such a long time. But she seemed fairly human in that, kind of like how she is now. But it seems like more traditional stuff has made her a lot more plant-like, just like her design and whatever. So maybe, like I said, maybe that's something that's going to pop up later on, or maybe they are kind of going what I would assume with the whole Batman animated series version being, based on the more traditional her or something like that. But nevertheless, she is played by Peyton List, which kind of a little bit of acting trivia. If you didn't know, on the Flash TV show, Captain Cold, Leonard Star, aka Captain Cold, he has a sister who is, I think her name was Golden Glider. I think she hasn't popped up in a very long time. But she was played by Peyton List, so it's just kind of interesting. She's on a DC show, one villain playing another villain, kind of a top tier villain. Because amongst the two, obviously, I know Poison Ivy better than I do Golden Glider. Like I said, even if that's even her name, I don't remember. I'm pretty sure that was it, but nevertheless. So that was pretty neat. I do like what it looks like aesthetically with her powers and stuff like that. Obviously, it's all about the whole, touches as well as kisses from her. It seems in this particular case, maybe, I don't know. I always thought it was touch, but, kiss was kind of the biggest thing. But, it's all about, because in a kiss you exchange fluid and it's what's inside of her DNA now going inside of your body. But I guess I always associated her entire body kind of being Poison Ivy. She touches you, it does that. Because doesn't she wear gloves in her typical designs? Maybe I'm not imagining that. I don't remember. Because in this case, she ends up doing it to Selena, but she ended up scratching Selena to kind of get it mixed into her blood system. Which, first of all, is super dickish of you to do that, but it's she's kind of pissed at everybody right now. It's actually been a while, so I actually don't remember where her and Selena stood. I thought they were on good terms. I don't know. Like I said, that's why I was trying to she's oh, the last time I saw you, I kind of hated you. It's Tabitha and Barbara, I can understand, especially because, Ivy was working with Penguin, so it kind of makes sense on that front. But it's I don't remember her and Selena. Well, yeah, because I think she ended up choosing, because Selena ended up choosing the other side, her and, wasn't that the whole, thing last season that she ended up, I don't remember. My memory's kind of blinking a little bit on that. So I think that was it, because Selena sold them out, and I think that was the last time. Maybe they had interactions this season. Like I said, I'm blanking. But nevertheless, it's still kind of dickish because this is one of your friends, but it was all kind of the approval point, which is kind of interesting because you're going to you're oh, I've tried this out and it hasn't necessarily worked out other times, but hey, maybe it's going to work out this time. Thanks for testing a untested cure on one of your few friends. And I also like the direction they taking her character too, because I was wondering about that, because I was under the impression, I was isn't Poison Ivy super smart? Which up to this point has been oh yeah, Ivy, you're kind of an idiot. Even when she got aged up, she was still an idiot. So I'm curious her development is different in this case. In that particular case, she was aged by one of the experiments from Indian Hill, from Arkham. with Hugo, and then I'm curious, like, because she went through like a more metamorphosis, almost like a cocoon thing, which kind of explains why we haven't seen her for a while. Maybe that mutation kind of actually increased her brain, because it seemed like when she didn't naturally develop. It's just only thing that changed was her appearance, like her body, like her first transformation when she became like, I guess, an early young adult, whatever that case may be. But now that she's even older, you know, at that time, her entire self grew, and probably her brain too. Because it definitely seems like she's a lot smarter now. She's mixing stuff together. To be fair, she mixed a lot of stuff together too. But it's just like Ivy was stupid in some regards. So maybe that's just going to be an aspect that we see. But even at this point, I'm not really sure. I mean, we haven't spent enough time with her to see whether or not she's still an idiot or not. But ultimately, we'll have to wait and see. But I appreciate that interesting thing about her and saying it's like, oh, we're going to run this city. Interesting thing I just recently randomly found out about, just because I was looking up some Injustice stuff, and I heard like an intro between, I think it was like Harley and Catwoman, and it's like, oh, Catwoman's like, oh, we're the Gotham what? And we're like the Gotham Sirens. I'm like, oh, okay. I think I might have vaguely remember seeing some comic book stuff about that, like just glimpses at it, but I don't remember. I was like, oh, that's okay, because that's the whole Sirens Club between Barbara, Tabitha, and Selena, which I love that commercial. And like, you know, Barbara's kind of into it, Tabitha's a tiny bit into it. Obviously, she's faking it for the camera. And you have Selena being like, yeah, you'll love it, and it's just like so weird. So I think that's going to be kind of an interesting thing. I wonder, will Tabitha kind of get brought into it or not, or is it just going to be them? I mean, this could easily be a situation they might. I'm curious to see will they kind of add in a Harley character or not. Because there's a whole Jerome situation, like, because even stuff kind of like, even on the internet thing, to label him as the Joker. Because I thought the whole thing with Jerome is like, he's meant to inspire the Joker. So I don't know if he is a Joker exactly, especially because the Joker never really has a background. But that stuff, you know, that stuff that's coming out even amongst the DCEU. Like, oh, maybe we'll actually kind of give you a little more explanation to the Joker. That in itself is a conversation for another day about where you stand on that. What do you want him to have? What do you not? Nevertheless. So I'm interested to see what continues with Ivy's story. This episode was also like Selena and Bruce's first interaction in a very quite a while. She's seeing him kind of partying it up and getting drunk, finds out about Alfred, and she's like, I don't buy this. And he's like, what are you talking about? It's like his whole whatever he's doing, firing Alfred and everything, like living up, kind of like, she's basically like, I know this isn't you, so whatever it is, like, this isn't you. But you know, Bruce is still in that stage of just kind of living things up, kind of trying not to care anymore. But no matter how hard you try, like, that's not going to take you far enough, because no matter how much you try to dull how you feel, it's not going to change anything. It's not going to make the pain go away. It's not going to make it any easier. But hey, that's Bruce's story. It's something he's going to have to find out on his own, discover on his own, because no one can teach. I feel like there's no one that can teach him that lesson. He's going to have to figure that out on his own. So I'm interested to see where that all kind of takes him going forward. Another thing this episode is we have Butch kind of being more of himself, but it seems like he's not telling anybody. He hasn't told Lee, and he sure as hell is not telling Ed, which I'm interested about, because I'm curious, how much does Butch remember as Solomon Grundy? Like the whole like Ed trying to manipulate him thing. I'm curious, is he going to be more? I mean, because like the last time we saw, like, obviously Butch and Ed didn't click, so it makes you wonder how much he remembers. Because I feel like, to be fair, he's trying to keep it low key, I guess. So maybe he hasn't 100% remembered everything, but maybe a good chunk of it enough to be conscious and aware, like, oh, I'm Butch, I'm not Solomon Grundy. So, but like I said, he's keeping it from Lee and Ed, specifically probably Ed, because, like, you know, I'm sure he's still pissed at Ed for like torturing them and, you know, cutting off Tabitha's hand and everything. So there's that. Because that's what I was kind of bringing up. I was curious, like, why, you know, Butch hasn't really struck yet. But maybe it's just, I'm biding my time, you know. Like I said, maybe he doesn't 100% remember. But he does remember enough to go track down Tabitha and tell her, like, oh, I love you. And I just need you to know that. So I am curious to see what she would do. I mean, especially kind of be hard, because there's still the whole aspect of, like, well, you know, Barbara killed, you know, Butch. And that kind of ruined everything between her and Tabitha. But then at the same time, it's like, well, Tabitha killed her, and now both of them are back. And it's like, oh, things between you and Barbara are okay. And now Butch is back, but Butch isn't necessarily him. So I'm wondering, is it just the whole, like, Solomon Grundy, you know, being dead and kind of being the way he is? Which I don't think there's a way of reversing that. Hey, maybe there is. Maybe that's something they'll gotta mess with. But it seems he's kind of stuck as the way he is. So I'm curious to see what they do. Will it be something he has to struggle with for the rest of the season? Like, that he has moments of slipping back into being Solomon Grundy that Kind of like, I know I'm crossing over to the Marvel angle, but the whole like angle of where like sometimes the Hulk has more control, and then there's points where the Hulk is the Hulk, but in that his mind is Bruce Banner's, or storylines like that, versions of the Hulk, which I didn't even know was a thing until like I've heard other people discuss it. Nevertheless, kind of a similar thing where he stays Solomon Grundy, has the power and everything, but then he just, because you saw that was a pretty sick ass moment at the beginning where he knocked that a bomb outside and exploded, which I love that little moment too, because so much was happening. You know, Jim was in the Narrows looking for Harvey. Alfred's living in the Narrows now. That's also the meetup place where Lee and the other people at the Narrows were meeting up at. That's also where Ivy was. So it was like so much was happening. And really quickly, since I was bringing it up earlier, it's something I feel like I don't remember ever really popping up too much with Ivy. I know like her kiss can kill people and stuff like that, but I didn't remember the whole plants growing. I mean, it would make sense. Makes you wonder, did anything ever happen to them? I mean, it's something I never like really knew was Swamp Thing was part of the DC universe too, so that's kind of one of those surprises. Like the whole Constantine situation being part of the DC is kind of along those same lines of like, oh yeah, you're part of that. Kind of like the Marvel equivalent. It's like, oh yeah, Howard the Duck is part of the Marvel universe. It's one of those like weird oddball things. Like, oh, that's okay. So it's like, makes you wonder, has there ever been a connection between Swamp Thing and Poison Ivy? Just they both care about their environment and stuff like that. Granted, she's a lot more hardcore, kind of fanatic about it than he like about the way that Swamp Thing will handle it, but it's just kind of something that was kind of popping in the back of my mind, mainly because of Injustice. But nevertheless, whatever. I went on a huge tangent. But the point I was bringing up is like, oh yeah, it's pretty neat that how her body, like how she can do that to people's bodies, like get plants growing. Like I said, I never really thought about it before, but that's probably something that's way existed in the comic books and stuff like that. Like, cause most of my brain is like, oh yeah, she controls you with like her sense. Like that she kind of like emits from her bodies and from the plants, and then like killing you with her kiss. That's kind of as much as my brain's ever thought about it. I don't know whether like animated wise that's as far as they've ever taken it, but like them cutting open that body like Lucius and the ME, and it's like, oh, like Poison Ivy is actually growing out of his body. I thought that was kind of a pretty neat aspect to it. So, but I love that the fact is all those worlds were basically colliding in that one moment. And I also do appreciate that the bad guy in this particular case being Toyman, which is kind of interesting because it's one of those things, like obviously it's the DC universe, so a lot of people share villains, like the whole aspect of like Ra's al Ghul or Ra's al Ghul. Like I knew him first as a Batman villain, but it's been such a long time that I still, at this point in time, still kind of associate him as an Arrow villain, because that was like the first big thing I've seen in more modern day, like dealing with that whole storyline of Ra's al Ghul or Ra's al Ghul, however you want to go about it. Nevertheless, Toyman, I know him more as a Superman villain. Like, I'm sure he popped up in, like, the 90s Batman cartoon, but I don't remember. He's probably popped up in other stuff, too, but, like, the things I remember the most is the animated series of Superman from the 90s. I definitively remember him with, like, the big, like, toy head that he'd wear all the time. There's that. I remember him from Smallville, as well as, obviously popping up in season 1 of Supergirl, where, and interestingly enough, Wynn's dad is Toyman on that particular Earth. So I'm just curious. I'm wondering, is that guy his son in this episode? Is that supposed to be Wynn, or is that supposed to be like, or was Toyman in this episode Wynn's grandfather, like canonically speaking? I'm curious about that, because a lot of the people, it's like, well, who they are in this particular case, because it's like, oh, you met Valerie Vale. And so obviously it's like, oh, you've got to be like Vicky's mom at the very least, or something like that. So it's one of those things. So it's this Toyman, like the Toyman that we know, like, is this his father, his grandfather, whatever the case may be. It's just kind of an interesting thing to see that villain here. He's been taken out because of Gordon, but I'm still curious to see, like, I mean, will that mean his son's going to follow in his footsteps? It's pretty neat seeing all his, like everything working like the way it did, like the little plane. The moment I saw the plane, I was like, Toyman? We're doing Toyman? Okay, that's cool. But I'm curious to see what happens. I mean, to be fair, we've already set up the whole like Scarecrow situation. Like, his dad wasn't necessarily Scarecrow, but basically his dad is the reason he became Scarecrow. So I'm wondering, is the same thing going to happen with Toyman's son? But we'll just kind of have to wait on that. I kind of had a feeling for quite a while, like when Jim and Lucius went to the shop and they were talking, it's like, oh yeah, my dad was on the phone with somebody. I was like, was it Ed? I was like, well, why would Ed want her dead? And then eventually, as the episode kind of went by, I was like, I was curious about, and then it's like, oh, I was like, obviously Ed's kind of got the split personality thing, and the episode kind of confirmed it. It's like, oh yeah, like his other side wants Lee dead because it's like, oh, it's a distraction because he wants to get rid of this Ed so that the Riddler can come back again. And I do appreciate that being an aspect of his character because I've always known him just being the deranged person, but I like that duality aspect of like, oh yeah, him trying to be Ed, Enigma, and the Riddler. They were kind of one person, but for such a long time, Ed felt kind of lost, didn't know his identity, he became the Riddler, and now who he is now is kind of split between two, because there's one side of him that's kind of falling for Lee, which the fact is him and Gordon, like Gordon finding out about Lee in this episode, I was so certain that was going to play up a little bit more, especially because Ed kind of has a thing for Lee, but apparently not. It might be something we'll see later on play up even more, but obviously he kind of has feelings for Lee, and so that's going to turn. Which I don't know if Lee's necessarily going to date you, because the whole Kirsten situation, you know, you killing her and everything. Well, his past relationships haven't worked out. They've kind of been kind of super failures in a sense. So, I mean, granted, technically, the Isabella situation kind of wasn't on you. That was kind of on Penguin, but you know, indirectly, that's going down that route. So. But I did appreciate that Barbara was kind of messing with Gordon. It's like, oh, you're looking for the doc. Oh, that's the type of, oh, that person's so dangerous. Might want to shoot first, ask questions later. I was like, that's super messed up. And like as the audience, it's like, we know why you're saying that. Which I'm curious, did it ever circle back to Gordon? Like, man, she said that. That was super, well, no, because she knew it was late. That's super messed up of her to say, or did he just never think too much on it? So, I'm always curious about the whole Barbara situation because she's always flirty towards Gordon, but I don't know if she actually really feels that way or she just does it because she knows it bothers him. Like, is she just doing that to mess with him? Like, or would she actually want him back or something? You know, it's something I'm curious about. But then Lee and Jim had that conversation like, oh, how long you been back? She's like, oh, I've been back a while. You know, she's basically taking charge of the Narrows, trying to get them on the right track. It's like, rather than being divided and against each other, taking from one another, it's like, hey, why don't we come together? We're stronger together, you know, try to build a good place for kids to grow up, the children of the Narrows, and just have a good home and community for everybody. And so I am kind of proud of Jim for not like pushing too hard. And I think, I don't know, I guess everything that he's recently been through is kind of keeping him from doing it. But he didn't ask Lee like, oh, come back. You know, it's like, oh, like, you know, he's just kind of like, oh, I'm glad you look good, you know? So I don't know, there'll probably be more interactions now that he knows that she's back. I like the roundabout way, especially because at the beginning when the building exploded, you see her leaving with Ed, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, like her and Jim didn't cross paths. I thought that was pretty neat. But kind of along the same lines, getting back to what I was bringing up earlier, I love that whole aspect of Ed. If it wasn't for Jim taking Toyman down, that would have come back. But that's still an aspect of like, oh yeah, I've got to worry about that now because I can't let anyone know that, you know, because, you know, you already had Jim being like, really? You're working with Ed? It's like, and Lee's kind of like, well, fate and everything. So it's like, we'll see how long you'll be okay with working with Ed until you find out, oh yeah, he's the one that's kind of secretly been trying to kill you. And the fact is that he doesn't remember is the saddest thing because it means he's blacking out and losing complete control like that. Kind of, like I said, kind of a multi-personality thing. Like I said, I'm curious to know if that's something that's popped up in his character for a long time. Like, it's never been something I've kind of come to know, but maybe it's just something Gotham's doing, which is, like I said, a very interesting approach. So, and then another storyline in this episode was the whole Alfred situation. Like I said, him being in the Narrows now, you know, him and Jim talking a little bit. And it's like, what are you doing here? It's like, well, he's kind of unemployed right now. I don't know if him and Jim ever really took time to really talk about it, but yeah, there's that. Him helping out at the Narrows kind of gave, like, you know, the people at the diner was like, oh my god, you're so awesome, Alfred, yo, like, even the guys that were trying to rob him, which is kind of crazy. It's like, the moment it's like, oh, look at this guy, he's got money. I'm like, oh, you pick the wrong dude to kind of mess with. Alfred kind of kicked one dude's ass, but it was like, no, Gordon stepped in. So, but him getting close to that lady, like, I was like, oh, is this going to be like a new lady in Alfred's life? And then you saw the mark, I'm like, oh, she's got an abusive boyfriend, which Alfred kind of stepped in, but sadly that situation made things worse, because ultimately, the dude ended up killing her. Her name's Tiffany, and framing Alfred from it. And it's like, for it, and that sucks. It's because that was like, you know, someone he was kind of getting close to. He opened up to her about certain things, about his whole situation being part of the military. Didn't, like, you know, without going into details, because I'm sure if he dropped the name, it would have been a little weird and awkward. So he didn't bring up Thomas's name. But it's like, oh, yeah, I had a friend He brought me over, gave me a job, kind of gave me new purpose because, after the military, after everything he'd done, Alfred was a little lost, but Thomas kind of gave him a new direction, kind of brought him here in America. And then, now that friend of his is gone, and he misses him every day. And opening up like that, because you never really hear Alfred talk like that. Obviously he's going to feel like that, but I'm sure that's something, it's a kind of obvious conversation, between Bruce and Alfred. Because that's the thing, like, Bruce is so caught up in his own sorrows, he doesn't think about the fact is Alfred's going through the same thing. He misses your parents just as much as you do. Especially, he kind of actually talked to Bruce about that before everything kind of went to shit between them anyway, but nevertheless. I was so rooting for Alfred when he was beating the crap out of dude. I was like, you suck so much. Especially because all the evidence was starting to point to Alfred. I was like, oh man, that sucks. Luckily, he got a little backup from Harvey, who's now working at a bar, which kind of fits. It doesn't seem like he's drinking. Most likely, him trying to, straighten himself out after everything that's kind of going down. And sadly, things between him and Jim are not on the best terms. Like, Jim's like, oh yeah, I missed you, buddy. It's like, no, you didn't. You've been dealing with some crap, I can tell, and you just want me back so you can unburden yourself of all your sins. It's like, you want to kind of deal with that? Deal with it on your own. I'm not going to be your priest. Which is sad because even if because the thing is, Gordon couldn't say anything because he knows it's true, because it's no one else he can rely on or whatever. I wonder if it's going to be like someone he turns to like Alfred, because it's like, oh, he has Harper being there, but the fact is he can't tell anyone, because if he tells anyone the truth, it's going to undo everything he's done at the GCPD, all the goodwill, all the goodness that's been stirred up. He did get a call in this episode, on his phone. I don't remember if it said a name on it. Maybe it did. I would assume it was Sophia, but I don't remember that really coming up at any other point during the episode, like about him getting that phone call. So it was most likely like Sophia calling him to get in contact with him. So he probably hasn't, like, since learning the truth, he probably hasn't been in contact with her. So that's probably what that was about, which I'm eager to continue that storyline, which definitely already know is going to be a thing continuing forward, obviously. But I feel so bad for Jim, because it's that situation of you try to do the right thing, but it's something even like, Harvey was saying, like, oh, I tell you not to do something, you do it anyway. But at the same time, it's like, it's one of those things that leave you conflicted, because it's like you have the best of intentions, but it's like, as I say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's like, because what was Harvey wasn't going to do anything about the Penguin situation, and it's just like, this is our city and we can't just let him kind of run things. So it's a situation of them both being wrong, and hopefully it's something that eventually they'll kind of come back and Harvey realizes his mistakes as well. Like, it isn't just all on Jim. It's also because, Harvey's dealing with the whole situation on, like, oh, they're in a whole pig situation. He shot a cop, and it's like he made the wrong decisions. Jim told him not to, and it's just like, but at the same time, I'm sure it's a lot of self-hate, and I'm sure he's deflecting a lot of, he's still keeping his self-hate, but also deflecting it on Jim because of also the mistakes that Jim's doing. But obviously Jim's got a lot of self-hate for that too. So I'm curious to see how they handle this whole situation going forward, So like I said, I do hope they, find their way back. It's like they've been through so much together, to the detriment of Harvey in some cases, because it's like, oh, like I say, I always find that such an interesting thing about the show. The fact is that, what Gordon goes through, because it's like, when you think Commissioner Gordon, you just think of the older Gordon, but it's like, yeah, obviously Gordon made mistakes along the way. He had to become the honorable man that we know him as, through most Batman canon, so it is interesting seeing those steps, just like we have Bruce trying to grow and becoming the man that we know he will one day become. It seems that, the same thing applies to, like, literally every hero and villain in this show, obviously. So that's kind of the antithesis, not the antithesis, the whole aspect of the show, I don't know what the right word would be. But nevertheless, like I said, I am very excited to have Gotham back. This was a great episode, and I'm very interested to continue on and see what the rest of the season has in store for us. And now moving on to this week's episode of Arrow, a crazy good episode. Holy crap. I am loving what they did with this whole, like, dividing of Team Arrow, and it's like, it is not getting better. In fact, things throughout this episode kept heating up more and more, because obviously you got Oliver, who's pressured because the fact of the matter is he needs to get to 70 million back, because it's like, oh, the whole Kate and James situation, but it's like, it turns out someone else stole that money, which the storyline went a little bit differently than I thought it would. I didn't realize that, Laura had already stolen the money. Under my brain, I was thinking, like, oh, obviously it's fake footage or something. I mean, it's not like that hasn't already been done or something. But obviously the one who did all, well, Well, who did Diaz get to do that? Like, fake that footage like that? Like, to the point that even, I mean, to be fair, Caden probably didn't look too much into it. He just saw what he wanted to see and just so fueled by rage, he probably didn't see anything. But you would have thought, like, he would have looked into it, which it took, like, Team Arrow kind of making him go, oh, looking at it, like, oh, something is fishy here. But the question is, who would he get to do that? Because he's not, like, a tech-savvy person. But the thing is, like, that's where my brain was going. It's like, okay, it's kind of, I was thinking like, oh, that's supposed to represent her going after that money now. But it's like, there's no way she would have done that. Lance has had her the entire time, but it's like, no. The way they're making it seem like it's literally only been like probably a couple hours subsequently since like, the previous episode. But I was like, so that's why I was like, oh, it couldn't have totally been her. But it's like, no, that's supposed to represent her having gotten the money earlier. But like, when would Laurel have had the time to go get them? I guess that was kind of one of her assignments, because I think there was at one point in time it's like, oh, where's Laurel? And it's like, I guess Caden was kind of like, nope, she's off doing something else. She was probably getting the money out for Caden and all of them, because the money was kind of get divided amongst them, because all Caden really cared about was getting revenge for her son. So I think that was the whole thing. I think that's the exact reason. But nevertheless, seeing the teams divided in this episode, holy crap. First, them like going like, oh no, you were obviously have something to do with Laurel. It's only because they found Dinah's like footprint there, and it's like, oh, that's the same place where Laurel went missing. So, and then there's that, and going as far as they did, like busting in there like that, which I don't know, man. Because the thing is, this episode is like everyone messed up. It isn't just one problem. It like Curtis and them are treating it like it's just Team Arrow's fault. It's like, no, you played into this too. You caused just as much problem, whether it's Dinah's need for revenge and your unwillingness to kind of cooperate. Oliver doesn't want to cooperate with you guys because he doesn't want Dinah to cross that line. Even going as far as saying like, even Oliver's like, I know I literally don't have like the right to talk to you about killing people, considering all that I do and have done. But the thing is, I don't want you crossing that line, because once you do, there is no coming back, and like, you're too good of a person to, no matter where we are at odds with this whole situation. Then there's also the situation of like, well, Vince wouldn't be dead if it wasn't for you guys. It's like, well, we were trying to stop the city from being destroyed, a lot of people getting killed. It's like, if you hadn't bailed on us and we had worked together, but because you were so divided, you didn't work together, you guys fell into a trap, and things might have worked out differently if they had worked together. Like, then maybe, just maybe, things could have been, because they are forgetting the dual side of it. It's like, oh yeah, you wanted us to go with you to help Vince. Like, oh, it's our fault for not going. But the city was literally in danger as well. And it's just like, they're so heated and mad at each other, they're not willing to see past each other. Which, I mean, obviously I was about to make the whole comparison to something else, but I'm not going to, because that's going to get a little too real. But nevertheless, it's just kind of like a situation of like, you're too blinded by your own rage. It's like, I feel like neither team is recognizing where they messed up, but in particular, I feel like Curtis and them are making it seem like everything is Oliver's fault. Which, yes, Oliver and team is to blame a lot for what they've done, but you gotta admit, Renee pissing Oliver off to the point he's like, oh, no, he's right. The fact of the matter is, your son, you should realize who you are. That the fact is, you're no hero, you're more like a thug, because beating people up is what you do. Yes, I know that was Renee, like, trying to egg Oliver on. So that was the kind of the point anyway, even going as far as saying like, oh, William, he'll kind of see you the same way too. And I'm like, wow. Because the fact of the matter is, literally Oliver and Renee are in the exact same situation. They are two fathers that are trying to take care of their children, trying to do the best that they can. Renee doing what he did was to get his daughter Zoe back. But at the same time, it's like, you're threatening everything that's in Oliver's life, which is like, it's something I don't get why he can't comprehend too. Like, at first he felt guilty about it, but then that's something I feel like the other team is kind of letting slip their mind too. It's like, yeah, there's all the betrayal and everything, all the surveillance and stuff, and it's like, oh, Renee suffered enough for it. It's like, well, the fact of the matter is, Oliver's still going to be on trial for being a Green Arrow and everything that he's done. So I think, I think that's something we need to go back to, because the fact of the matter is, it's not just Oliver's life that he put Renee's messing up with. It's like, William's too. Who does William have outside of Oliver? Let's not forget, his mom is dead. He has no other family. If his dad goes to prison, that's it, And you don't know what that's going to do, like what that might do to William after everything that they've been through, after he's been through, like what that will do to what it changes it will make. But like I said, at the same time, you understand, because it's like Renee just wants his daughter back. And then there's the whole situation of like, well, Agent, Watson already has all this information, so it's like he's trying to cut a deal. Which at the same time, you're not even. It's not like the other team is actually thinking about the fact is. It's like, well, let's not forget he didn't just betray Oliver. He actually betrayed us too, because by selling Oliver out, he was subsequently selling us out too. But they're a lot more forgiving in this situation, and then just Oliver just giving up on Renee like that, just kind of spying on them and everything, which. It was a small thing, but it blew up into even more because everyone took their sides. Like Renee had Curtis and Dinah, whereas Oliver has Felicity and John. But like it didn't just stop there; that things kept escalating. Because even Dinah, like, yes, she didn't cross that line, but she went through a lot. She went to attacking people, even knocking Quentin out with her staff. And then there was another thing too, while Renee was shooting, trying to stop Dinah and them, let's not forget who else was over there. There was Thea, Oliver's sister, as well as Quentin himself. Like, obviously I kind of got the feeling like he had a thing for Thea, and then also like Quentin's someone you respect, but you were still shooting in a direction you could have ended up hurting them. There was an explosion near them and everything, so it's like, come on. And there's also the same thing about like the whole problem with Renee later on, because his wounds opened up, so things are bad. But it's like, what did Dinah say? Dinah's like, don't hold back against them. And it's like, the fact of the matter is, Oliver held back against you. Yeah, he beat the crap out of you, but if Oliver wanted to put you down, he could have put you down. Because none of you could actually stop Oliver. Let's not forget the whole recruit training in the beginning anyway, when he took Curtis, Renee, and Evelyn all down at the same time. To be fair, that was them a lot less well trained and not well equipped, but still, like, I think that speaks volumes. But at the same time, he was telling Renee to stay down, but what did Renee do? He kept coming. What did Dinah tell him to do? Not to hold back. So like I said, it is fault all across the board. But luckily, Curtis was told by Dinah not to cross that line. It's like, the way you're talking right now is the same way that Oliver is, which is interesting considering the fact is Oliver's the one trying to talk. There's, like I said, it's just, I like legitimately in this situation, I still side with Team Arrow. I know this is on some like Breaking Bad level of like divisiveness, and what I mean is how everyone was like, oh yeah, we're full team Walt, and then Walt start doing more and more shit, and it's like, I don't know if I'm team Walt anymore, except for some people are like, nope, I want to see Walt win in the end. Like, there's that dedication. So there's a part of me that's like, yo, I gotta stay with Team Arrow. Like, I feel like, yo, come on, man. I mean, to be fair, we're a lot more attached to Team Arrow rather than Curtis's team, but at the same time, it makes you feel shitty because it's like, you like them too, because we're all Team Arrow here. There should be this division like this, but it sucks, dude. Especially with, when it's all said and done, because now Curtis and Dinah are like, there's no more communications between us. I mean, even them shutting the chip down in John's arm to do what they did, and it's like, holy crap. Like I said, there's been kind of pain all across the board in this situation. So, and then on top of all of this, there's the whole Quentin and Laurel situation where it did seem like he was kind of reaching out to Laurel. I thought was kind of an interesting twist where he's kind of like, oh, I'll go with you. I was like, wait, what? Yeah, basically start that life with them. But I thought it was kind of interesting too, because he talked about the fact is the reason why Laurel's going to do what she's doing. She never had a father figure, that basically she's always been around these other powerful people, kind of trying to fill that hole in her heart, whether it be Zoom, Adrian Chase. So trying to fill that void in her heart. And it's like, I am curious because it seemed like she might have actually been really okay with the whole, like, yeah, it could have been. I mean, the thing is, you can never know really what's in Laurel's heart. I mean, Quentin kind of thought he did. And, Thea, I knew Thea was going to follow him because Thea, you could tell she could, like, was like, something's up with Quentin. So, but even then, she's kind of like, hey, we got each other's back. And even though Quentin kind of betrayed them, like, Oliver can understand too. And I thought that was such a good point that Diggle brought up. It's like, he's second guessing it and everything. And then Oliver's like, well, the fact of the matter is, if they didn't look like our team, if they weren't our team, under these circumstances, will we be so reluctant to fight them? But then, like, Diggle's like, well, on the other side of it, if the person we're trying to protect didn't look like Laurel, would we be going through this so much? And that's something even Dinah threw in his face. It's like, I guess the only reason why you care about people is if they look like Laurel. But it's like, I mean, it's also because the fact is Oliver understands what that's like. I mean, it's not even just now. Like, the fact of the matter is Oliver's always given this Laurel a chance. Like, when they captured her originally, he saw something there. It's because he wanted to believe in her just as much as Quentin did, because Quentin was like, oh, maybe I can get my daughter back. Which also begs the question, like, what would Sarah think? Would Sarah, like, not be okay with it? Because it's like, oh, you're trying to replace my sister, your daughter, yes, she looks like Laurel, but she's from a different Earth. This isn't your Laurel. Don't try. You're trying to, it might be that situation of like it's like you're trying to replace her, so it might be besmirching her memory some. But luckily, Laurel. I mean, not luckily, but sadly, Laurel got away. The thing is, not unless I misheard her, but it sounded like at the ending she was kind of like, "Oh, my name is Laurel Lance," and she was kind of like, "I've been kidnapped for like 2 years or something like that," which is basically subsequently since she died in season 4. So that's what I'm wondering: is she actually going to protect herself by being like, "Oh no, I'm actually Laurel Lance. Like people thought I was dead, but no, I was actually kidnapped, and no one knew that I was actually still alive." Because this way, she's actually kind of protected because she's in a public light. That means that the others can never go after her, especially because Laurel's got the reputation of being Black Canary, so it's kind of like, oh, there's a reputation of like, oh yeah, like we know, like people in Star City know who she was and what she did, not unless she changes things, like because the fact is she couldn't get that far still being wounded, so I'd assume she's still, by the look of things, it seemed like she might have still been in Star City, but we'll just have to wait and see. But that'd be kind of interesting if she did kind of pull that, like assuming Laurel, like at the very least, this buys her time where she could be in a hospital, and at the same time she'll have to once again have protection because people would like, oh, aren't you? Whoa, you're Laurel. That's crazy. You're the former Black Canary and everything like that. So I'm very interested to see what that does because I don't know. Like I said, Curtis's team, like obviously Dinah's no longer about killing her, but getting justice and everything, and it's just. And there's also that situation too. It's like, oh, what is justice? It's like the fact is that Oliver was going to let her go after everything that she's done. To be fair, Oliver's actually done that before. Let's not forget where him and Slade stand. And Slade's the dude that killed his mom. If him and Slade can like be allies, be even friends, and understand one another, which also shows you who Oliver is in comparison. I doubt like the Oliver at the beginning of this series, like the one fresh off of Lee and you, would have ever let that happen. To be fair, like he always kind of held himself back when it came to Slade because like Slade was like a brother to him, hence why he didn't kill Slade, got him locked up. If Laura was going to be punished, it's like lock her up, don't do that, go down that path. So, but then again, that's a situation of like him, like, because everyone else he's ever quote unquote killed, it's never been someone he had a connection with. Damien Dark didn't have a connection with. Ra's al Ghul, not a connection with. Adrian, yes, but Adrian kind of did that to himself because he wasn't trying to do that because he knew, what that meant for the island of Lee and you, but still. Like, that has an aspect of like, well, because it was still someone he knew, that someone who taught him everything, well, most of what he knows, and was kind of like a brother to him, that he needed. It kind of puts him almost in the same category as Laurel, but obviously being a little bit different because like he's known Laurel for so long. But it's kind of like you have to add in the context of like, well, you being on Lee and you and trying to survive. That adds like bonus points to that social link aspect. I've been doing that a lot lately, kind of comparing and throwing in like persona aspects into like comparisons like that. But nevertheless, so. Everything is very dire. I am curious to see what happens going forward with the whole Anatoly situation. Like, will we be seeing any more of him this season or not? Like, subsequently since he left, obviously Diaz is kind of stepping into the reins as being kind of like the main antagonist that we're dealing with. I'm curious, will he track down Laurel or not? Because all the villains have gone their separate ways, but will they come back together or not? Or at the very least, like I said, at the very least, it seems like Diaz is the one that's kind of taking advantage of the situation. I'm interested to see what they would do. Part of me was halfway expecting when Oliver admitted on live, talking to everyone, is like, yeah, I failed the city. I didn't recover the money. Probably won't. I was hoping on some level that Laurel did just at the last minute transferred all the money and she got away. But I mean, I don't know if she'll have that change of heart. Like, I don't know if her time of Quentin and Oliver and them willing to protect her, whether that had changed her mind or not. Ultimately, we will still have to wait and see where that all takes us going forward. Like I said, I appreciate the storyline being something that isn't just 100% like, oh, like it's resolved. Like, things were bad before, but things are at all time low. Like I said, Curtis, like, nope, no more team, like, interaction between our teams. You do your thing and we do ours. No communications. We're done with you. So it almost seems like, holy, there was literally an episode, a few episodes back. It was like, I think episode 9 exactly was the, irreconcilable differences. This is that point, because at least then it's like, oh, maybe stuff can work out. It's like, no, at this point in time, like it seems like Team Arrow in this shape and form is done. I mean, Oliver could have gotten a little crazy on you because you also shot Felicity too. Yes, she got in front of your fire, so obviously it shows like they weren't full forcing it, but like it's just a sucky situation all around. And I am curious to see, could they potentially come back from this? There might not be. Curtis and his team might just continue on, but maybe eventually down the road, they'll have a better relationship with Team Arrow. I don't know. I have no idea, like, how it could no matter what it is, no matter what the circumstances, how things could kind of go back from this, you know? So, I mean, ultimately, we'd have to wait and see. And then you also had the whole angle about Oliver's whole trial situation. Now, all of that was set up by Caden, but like Diaz said, it's like, dude, you gave me like the perfect situation. Yeah, you might be backing out now, but the fact of the matter is, you've laid out all the groundwork. You've basically destroyed the infrastructure of basically Star City, so you made it easier for the take. And Team Arrow is broken because of that whole situation. He can just step in. Like, I'm curious, like the new police chief. Was that someone that Caden already had in mind, or did Diaz think of like, oh my God, like Pike is dead, like, oh, you've already kind of left it open-ended, so let me just slip my own people in? Because it even turns out that DA guy, is he a DA? I think he is. The guy that's got things against Oliver, the one who's prosecuting him as like this whole situation. It seems like, oh, he's part of this whole situation too. So like, was he Ricardo's guy from the very beginning? And it's like when him and Caden joined forces, they brought that to the fore, like he brought that along. So, or is this a relationship that subsequently formed since Diaz is he's still in the shadows, but he's kind of come out now more to be like, oh yeah, I'm kind of running things. So I'm curious to see. If that's the case, it's actually kind of interesting because this also puts Ricardo like in a very distinct situation. Like, none of Oliver's main antagonists have ever been like crime bosses or something. And it seems like that's all like Diaz's like whole shtick is like he's kind of a crime boss. Like, other people were like super villains in their own right. Like, you know, Malcolm being his whole situation, Slade, Ra's al Ghul, Damien Dark, even Adrian. Like, this is like our first crime boss. Like, he's fought in a lot lower level crime bosses, but they've never been like main like seasonal antagonists. So it's kind of an interesting thing. It's kind of like, you know, like take the Flash for example. Like, it's a kind of similar situation how like most of his antagonists have been speedsters, and now he has like a main antagonist that's not a speedster. So it's kind of that similar situation of like, this is like like I said, just he seems like just a smart criminal. You know, it's just kind of interesting when you actually break it down like that. But I'm curious to see what that means going forward. It does seem like that whole Agent Watson situation, I mean, we haven't seen her in a long while. I really want to say the last time we saw her was the Thanksgiving episode when she arrested Oliver. That might have been the last time we've seen her, and that's been a while. So I am curious to see what her whole situation's about going forward too. Like, I don't think she's part of this. I think with the more time that's going on, I'm like, nah, she's probably just a really good FBI agent who's just kind of got a whiff of like what's going on in Star City, and just she's very by the book and justice like. So she's probably like, no, I'm not going to stand by and let this happen anymore. You've kind of run amok. I know what you really are, even though you're hiding it. So maybe it would turn out that the fact of the matter is that she is dirty. I kind of hope she is. I hope just so this whole situation can kind of get a little, you know, swept under the rug, you know. So Oliver's life can go back to being at least slightly less complicated. Like I said, being torn in 4 different directions, because he's got to worry about that, being the Green Arrow, also being in the mayor, and then the whole situation with the other team now where everything stands as that's just a lot on someone's plate. Things are not looking good for our Arrowverse heroes this season. Like, there are just complications upon complications. Particular, like I said, the only ones who seem kind of in the good right now seem to be the Legends, at least for now. Sarah's not necessarily in the best position with the whole Mollis thing, but, you know, obviously, like, overall, none of them, like I said, I still feel like the Legends are kind of on the good side to a certain extent. I'd probably put Kara kind of second after them, and then Barry and Oliver are kind of tied for just kind of how screwed you are. And where would I put Black Lightning? Probably put him tied with Kara, because Kara's not in a terrible situation. Things are kind of bad, but not not kind of like a stressful and just kind of. I mean, Oliver, Barry's obviously got a little better off because his situation is, I'm no longer in prison, so that kind of puts his situation a little bit better than Oliver's. Team Arrow's situation is just kind of like the worst currently, so I don't know. I'm just going off on the tangent, so I do apologize. Like I said, great episode. Like I said, I'm loving the direction they are taking us. Like I said, to me, the moment that hit me was just kind of like the moment like Renee was saying all that. Like I said, in retrospect, yes, he was talking trash just to get close to Oliver to put the track on. But the moment he put that arrow to his neck, and then you had like John putting a gun to like to Curtis, and Donna was like, dude, shit's getting real. And that was just foreshadowing just how this episode was going to play out. So ultimately, like I said, we just have to wait and see what goes down in the next episode, as well as the rest of the season. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.